The girl who listened when others only spoke. Emma Fitzgerald was always the quiet one. In elementary school, teachers would forget she was in the classroom until roll call. In high school, she sat in the back corner of the cafeteria, eating her sandwich while chaos erupted around her. Her classmates called her Mouse because she moved so silently through the hallways. Some thought she was shy, others thought she was strange. But Emma wasn't uncomfortable with silence. She lived in it, breathed it, understood it in ways that others never could. While her peers filled every moment with noise, chattering, laughing, playing loud music, Emma found comfort in the spaces between sounds. She would sit by her bedroom window at night, listening to the distant hum of the city, the rhythm of traffic lights changing, the pattern of footsteps on pavement, the difference between a car engine that was running smoothly and one that was struggling. She heard things others missed because she wasn't drowning them out with her own voice. In 1955, at the age of 19, Emma made a decision that surprised everyone who knew her. She enlisted in the United States Navy. Her mother cried, worried that her quiet daughter would be eaten alive by the harsh military environment. Her father, a veteran himself, just nodded slowly and said, "The Navy could use someone who knows how to listen." Emma's older brother, Marcus, who had served in the Navy during World War II, was the only one who seemed to understand. "You know what they need on submarines, Em?" he asked her the night before she left for boot camp. "They need people who can work in silence. People who understand that sometimes the quietest person in the room is the most important one there." Boot camp and breaking point. Naval training was brutal for Emma, but not in the ways people expected. The physical challenges, the running, the obstacle courses, the endless drills were difficult but manageable. What nearly broke her was the constant noise and the relentless pressure to speak up, be louder, command attention. Her drill instructor, Chief Warrant Officer Patricia Hayes, was a force of nature. She was loud, direct, and had no patience for what she called wallflowers. During the first week, she stood in front of Emma's bunk and shouted, "Fitzgerald, you planning to whisper orders to the enemy? Speak up or ship out!" The other recruits laughed. Some of them started imitating Emma's soft voice during breaks, making exaggerated shh gestures when she walked by. One particularly cruel recruit named Sandra Davidson started a rumor that Emma was mute and had somehow faked her way through the entrance interview. Emma endured it all in silence. She didn't fight back, didn't defend herself, didn't raise her voice. She simply continued doing her work with quiet precision. She learned every procedure perfectly. She memorized every protocol. She scored at the top of her class in written exams, but in practical exercises that required verbal commands, she struggled. One afternoon, during a training exercise, Emma was supposed to give orders to her squad during a simulated emergency. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. Chief Hayes stopped the drill immediately. "Fitzgerald, if you can't command respect with your voice, you'll never make it in the real Navy. This isn't a library. This is the military. People's lives depend on clear, loud communication. Maybe you should reconsider whether this is the right place for you." That night, Emma sat alone outside the barracks, seriously considering quitting. She felt like a failure. Maybe everyone was right. Maybe the Navy wasn't meant for quiet people like her. Maybe there was no place in the military for someone who preferred listening to speaking. But then she remembered something her brother Marcus had said. The Navy needs people who can work in silence. And she realized maybe her quiet nature wasn't a weakness. Maybe it was just the wrong role that was bringing it out as one. Finding her place in the silence. The next morning, Emma requested a meeting with the career counselor. She asked about roles that required intense focus, careful listening, and attention to subtle details. The counselor pulled out a file and smiled. "Have you ever considered sonar operation?" Emma had heard of sonar, the technology that used sound waves to detect objects underwater, but she didn't know much about it. The counselor explained that sonar operators worked in dark, quiet rooms wearing headphones for hours at a time, listening to acoustic signals that could indicate anything from a whale to an enemy submarine. It required extraordinary patience, exceptional hearing, and the ability to distinguish between countless different sounds in the ocean. "Most people can't handle it," the counselor said. "The isolation drives them crazy. The constant focus gives them headaches. But for someone who's comfortable with silence, who has patience and discipline, it's one of the most critical jobs in the Navy." For the first time since arriving at boot camp, Emma smiled. She applied for sonar training immediately. When Chief Hayes found out, she called her into her office. "Sonar, huh? That's a smart move, Fitzgerald. Maybe you knew all along what you were meant to do. You've got the discipline. Now we'll see if you've got the ear for it." The sonar training school was located in Key West, Florida. Emma arrived with a group of 20 recruits, most of them men who had been selected for their technical aptitude and attention to detail. The head instructor, Lieutenant Commander James Richardson, was a veteran sonar operator who had served on destroyers during the Korean War. On the first day, he addressed the class. "Sonar operation isn't about being the loudest voice in the room. It's about being the most attentive ear. You'll spend hours in the dark listening to sounds that most people couldn't distinguish if their life depended on it. But your life will depend on it, and so will the lives of everyone on your ship." Emma thrived. For the first time in her military career, her natural tendencies were assets rather than liabilities. While other students struggled with the long hours of silent concentration, Emma found them peaceful. While others got frustrated trying to distinguish between similar acoustic signatures, Emma's patient, careful listening allowed her to pick up subtle differences. She learned to identify the unique sound signatures of different types of vessels: the low rumble of a merchant ship, the higher-pitched whine of a destroyer, the nearly silent movement of a submarine. She learned to distinguish biological sounds, whales, dolphins, schools of fish, from mechanical ones. She learned to detect anomalies, irregularities, anything that didn't belong in the acoustic environment. Her instructors were impressed. Lieutenant Commander Richardson wrote in her evaluation, "Petty Officer Fitzgerald possesses an exceptional aptitude for sonar operation. Her patience, focus, and auditory discrimination are among the best I have encountered in 20 years of training operators. She has the potential to be outstanding in this field." The USS Constellation assignment. After completing her training, Emma was assigned to the USS Constellation, a Forrestal-class aircraft carrier. It was one of the largest warships in the Navy, home to over 3,000 sailors and capable of carrying more than 70 aircraft. Emma would be working in the sonar room, part of the ship's anti-submarine warfare team. When she reported for duty, she discovered she was the only woman in the sonar division. Her new supervisor, Senior Chief Petty Officer Donald Walker, was a gruff, experienced sailor who had been operating sonar since World War II. He looked at Emma's personnel file and frowned. "You're awful quiet, Fitzgerald. That gonna be a problem?" "No, Senior Chief," Emma said softly. "I do my best work in silence." Walker studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Good. because in this room, I don't care if you never say a word, as long as you report what you hear. Your job isn't to talk, it's to listen." The sonar room was everything Emma had hoped for. It was dark, climate-controlled, and most importantly, quiet. She shared watches with 3 other operators: Petty Officer James Morrison, a nervous young man from Ohio; Petty Officer Carlos Mendez, a confident veteran who had served on destroyers; and Petty Officer 3rd Class Robert Chen, fresh out of training like Emma. The work was repetitive and required intense concentration. Emma would sit at her station for 4-hour watches, headphones covering her ears, eyes scanning the waterfall display that showed acoustic data as cascading patterns of light. She listened to the constant background noise of the ocean, the ambient sound of water movement, the biological symphony of marine life, the distant rumble of surface traffic. Most of the time, nothing unusual happened, but that was the job, maintaining constant vigilance so that when something did happen, you caught it immediately. Her crewmates were initially skeptical. Morrison whispered to Mendez that he didn't think the quiet girl had what it took. Mendez, more experienced, told him to wait and see. "Some of the best operators I've known barely said 2 words. It's not about talking, it's about hearing." The first test. 3 weeks into her deployment, Emma detected something unusual during her midnight watch. It was a faint sound, almost imperceptible beneath the background noise, a rhythmic clicking pattern that didn't match any biological source she had studied. It was too regular, too mechanical. She marked the bearing and continued tracking it. The sound came and went, sometimes disappearing entirely for several minutes before returning. Emma said nothing at first, wanting to be certain before reporting. She cross-referenced the acoustic signature with the ship's database, checking it against known patterns. After 30 minutes of careful analysis, she was confident. She picked up the phone to the bridge. Her voice was soft but clear. "Bridge, Sonar. Contact bearing 270, range approximately 8,000 yards. Possible Soviet submarine acoustic signature. Recommend tracking and classification." The watch officer responded immediately. Within minutes, the ship's anti-submarine warfare team was activated. Additional sensors were deployed. The contact Emma had detected was confirmed: a Soviet submarine, likely conducting surveillance on the carrier group. Senior Chief Walker came down to the sonar room. He reviewed Emma's detection, listened to the audio himself, and nodded approvingly. "Good catch, Fitzgerald. That was a tough one to pick up. Most operators would have missed it or dismissed it as biologics." Morrison and Chen looked at Emma with new respect. Mendez just smiled and said, "Told you." But not everyone was impressed. Some of the male sailors in other divisions made comments. They said Emma got lucky. They said anyone could have heard it. They said Walker was going easy on her because she was the only woman in the division. Emma heard the whispers but said nothing. She simply returned to her station and continued listening. The night that changed everything. 6 months into the deployment, the USS Constellation was operating in the North Atlantic as part of a NATO exercise. It was a cold November night and the seas were rough. Emma was on watch from midnight to 4 in the morning, the quietest and loneliest shift. The sonar room was empty except for Emma and Petty Officer Morrison, who was manning the secondary station. Morrison was tired and bored, struggling to stay alert. Emma, as always, was completely focused on her headphones and display. At 0147 hours, Emma heard something that made her blood run cold. It was a transient sound, a brief, sharp acoustic event that lasted less than 2 seconds. But Emma recognized it immediately from her training. It was the sound of a torpedo tube flood valve opening. Someone, somewhere in the dark ocean, was preparing to fire a torpedo. Her heart raced, but her voice remained calm and controlled. "Morrison, I need you to verify a contact immediately." Morrison, jolted from his drowsy state, put on his headphones. "What am I listening for?" "Bearing 045, I heard a possible torpedo tube flood. Listen." They waited in tense silence. 30 seconds later, Emma heard it again, another transient, followed by what sounded like a torpedo tube being opened. "Bridge, sonar, we have a submarine contact bearing 045, range estimated 4,000 yards. I'm hearing torpedo tube preparations. This is a real-world threat. Recommend immediate evasive action." There was a moment of silence on the other end. Then the watch officer's voice, sharp and commanding. "Sonar, bridge, confirm hostile intent. Are you certain?" Emma knew what was at stake. If she was wrong, she would be responsible for causing panic and disrupting the entire NATO exercise over a false alarm. Ships would break formation, aircraft would be scrambled, it would be chaos, and her career would likely be over. But if she was right and said nothing, people would die. "Bridge, sonar, I am certain. We have a hostile submarine preparing to fire. Recommend emergency turn to starboard and full alert status." The watch officer didn't hesitate. "All hands, this is the bridge. Torpedo threat, torpedo threat, torpedo threat. All stations, general quarters. Helmsman, hard right rudder, all ahead flank." The massive carrier began its emergency turn. Throughout the ship, alarms blared. 3,000 sailors raced to their battle stations. Fighter jets on the flight deck were armed and prepared for launch. The destroyer escort moved to place themselves between the carrier and the threat bearing. In the sonar room, Emma continued tracking the contact. Her hands were shaking, but she forced them steady. She had made the call, now she had to follow through. 15 seconds after the turn began, Emma heard the unmistakable sound she had been dreading, the high-pitched whine of a torpedo motor starting up. "Bridge, sonar, torpedo in the water, bearing 045, high-speed screws, closing fast." The next 90 seconds were the longest of Emma's life. The carrier was turning, but it was so massive that changing direction took time. The torpedo was closing at over 40 knots. Emma tracked it on her display, watching the acoustic signature get brighter and brighter as it approached. The ship's anti-torpedo countermeasures were deployed. Acoustic decoys were launched into the water, creating false targets designed to confuse the torpedo's guidance system. The destroyer escort launched additional countermeasures and positioned itself in the torpedo's path. Emma watched on her display as the torpedo signature wavered, confused by the decoys. It turned slightly, chasing a false target. Then it changed course again, still hunting. "Come on," Morrison whispered next to her. "Take the decoy! Take the decoy!" The torpedo signature moved past the carrier's projected path, drawn away by one of the decoys. It exploded harmlessly in the water, half-mile from the ship. The sonar room erupted in relieved cheers. Morrison grabbed Emma in a bear hug, but Emma simply removed her headphones, marked the time and bearing in her log, and quietly reported, "Bridge, sonar, torpedo detonation confirmed, threat neutralized, original contact still present on bearing 040, now moving away at high speed." The aftermath. The investigation revealed that the submarine had been a Soviet attack submarine conducting an aggressive simulated attack during the NATO exercise, far more aggressive than the exercise rules allowed. The torpedo had been a practice weapon, but no one on the carrier had known that in the moment. If Emma hadn't detected the preparation sounds, if she hadn't trusted her judgment enough to call the alert, the carrier would have been struck and potentially damaged. The commanding officer of the USS Constellation, Captain Michael Harrison, called Emma to his quarters. She stood nervously at attention, still uncertain whether she was in trouble for causing such a major alert. "Petty Officer Fitzgerald," the captain said, "I've been in the Navy for 27 years. I've commanded ships through peace and war. And I can say without hesitation that your actions tonight saved this vessel and possibly saved lives. Your detection was extraordinary. Your judgment was sound. Your courage in making that call, knowing the consequences if you were wrong, was remarkable. He stood and extended his hand. The Navy needs more sailors like you. Thank you. Emma was awarded the Navy and Marine Corps Achievement Medal for her actions, but more importantly, she gained something she had never sought: respect. Her crewmates stopped seeing her as the quiet one and started seeing her as one of the best operators on the ship. Senior Chief Walker recommended her for advanced training. Other sonar operators sought her advice. The story spread throughout the fleet. The girl who barely spoke had saved an aircraft carrier with her voice, not by shouting, but by listening and then speaking up at the critical moment. A quiet legacy. Emma Fitzgerald served in the Navy for 20 years, eventually becoming a senior chief petty officer and one of the most respected sonar instructors in the service. She trained hundreds of operators, always emphasizing the same lessons: patience, focus, and the courage to trust your ears and your judgment. She never became loud or boisterous. She remained the quiet professional she had always been. But she proved something important: that in a world that values loud voices and constant speech with intelligence, and extroversion with capability, some of the most essential skills have nothing to do with being loud. She showed that listening is just as valuable as speaking, that patience is a form of strength, that quiet confidence can be more powerful than loud bravado, that knowing when to speak and having the courage to do so at the critical moment matters more than speaking constantly. How many talented people have we overlooked because they didn't fit our mental image of what a leader or expert should look like? How many quiet ones have we dismissed as shy or weak when they were actually observing, analyzing, and understanding things that others missed in their rush to be heard? Emma Fitzgerald didn't try to become someone she wasn't. She didn't force herself to be loud or aggressive or dominant. She found the place where her natural abilities, her comfort with silence, her patience, her exceptional listening skills were not just accepted, but valued. And when the moment came, when lives were on the line, she had the courage to use her voice in the way that mattered most. The world still needs people like Emma. In our offices, our schools, our communities, our families, we need people who listen more than they speak, who observe before they act, who think before they talk, who understand that silence isn't empty, it's full of information if you know how to hear it. So the next time you meet someone quiet, don't assume they have nothing to contribute. Don't pressure them to be louder, more aggressive, more dominant, like everyone else. Instead, give them the space to contribute in their own way. Create environments where different types of people can excel. Value the listeners as much as the speakers. Because somewhere out there, right now, there's another Emma Fitzgerald, quiet, underestimated, sitting in the back of the room. And one day, when no one else hears the danger approaching, her voice might be the one that saves us all. If Emma Fitzgerald's story resonated with you, don't let it fade into silence. Hit that like button to honor all the quiet heroes who never sought recognition but saved lives anyway. Your like helps this story reach someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe to this channel for more untold stories of unlikely heroes. We share these forgotten histories every week because the people who change the world don't always make the headlines. Sometimes they work in dark rooms, wearing headphones, listening to sounds that others never notice. Share this video with someone who's been told they're too quiet, too shy, too reserved. Share it with the introvert in your life who needs to know that their way of being in the world is valuable. Share it with anyone who's ever felt like they didn't fit the mold of what a hero is supposed to look like. Leave a comment below. Are you the quiet one? Have you ever been underestimated because you don't speak up constantly? What's your superpower that others don't always see? Let's celebrate the quiet observers, the careful listeners, the people who speak rarely but meaningfully. And if you're an educator, a manager, a leader, tell us, how do you create space for the quiet voices on your team? How do you recognize and value different types of contributions? Turn on notifications so you never miss our next story, because every voice matters, even the quiet ones, especially the quiet ones. Emma Fitzgerald didn't need to be loud to be heard. She just needed to be in the right place, doing the work that mattered, and having the courage to speak up when it counted most. What will you do with your voice?